All right, good morning YouTube. In today's video, we're going to be talking about high frequency back training. So I am an advocate of high frequency back training for a couple of reasons that we're going to get into today. And also as far as the overall aesthetic and your overall performance, I think having a strong back has very little weakness, like downsides or very little cons. I don't think that there's any real issues if you have a strong back. We're very much, front focused, so we're very much crunched in. A lot of everything we do is in front of us, so it's very easy to overdevelop the things that we see in the mirror. But it's very important that we actually balance it out with back training. Now, there's other things that we're going to get into today that's going to make this a lot easier for you, so that it's something that you can implement fairly easily into your current programming. So let's get started. All right, so why do I advocate high frequency back training? So for one, the back is a very fatigue resistant muscle. It's something that I found to be, I don't get sore in my back nearly as much as I would any other exercise, any other muscle. If I were to train my chest every day, if I were to train my triceps or biceps or even my quads, if I were to train them every single day, I would get very sore with them. But for the back, I have found that this is not something I really find an issue with, and it's something that I have found many people have in common. Generally speaking, rowing exercises, vertical pulling exercises typically don't cause a significant amount of soreness for most people, and you can actually train them very frequently. This is something that happens, in the military or calisthenic athletes, because they will almost always do pull-ups on a very frequent basis, but there's not really any drawbacks that I see beyond the first couple, maybe 3 weeks or so, to like at most to get acclimated. It's very rare for me to meet someone who doesn't acclimate within a 3 week period where they are doing it very frequently. And also the back is very similar to something like the calves or the forearms. The calves and the forearms are involved in everything you do. Every time you take a step, every time you grab anything, every time you lift anything, you're using these muscles, so they are just very fatigue resistant. And also the back has multiple muscles within it. It's not just the lats. There's the rear delts, there's your traps, there's your low back, everything. I'm throwing everything all at once in this video, but more videos will come in the future to kind of target specific parts of it. But generally speaking, it is a very big muscle group, and there's a lot of muscles there. So when I say high frequency back training, you have to understand that certain movements are able to be trained very frequently, and also because there's so many muscles there, if there is a specific muscle or movement that isn't really feeling that great, there's other things that you can do that will develop the musculature of the back. So let's get into that. So like I said, looking at the back muscle anatomy, besides going below the lower back, going toward the glute medius, look at everything that's already there. So, like I said, the lats, the traps, the rear delts, the infraspinatus. I'm not the best at pronouncing things, but and you could go much deeper than this, like teres major, teres minor, and a lot of these smaller muscle groups, while not typically like you're not gonna find like videos on like how to build a big teres major or something like that, but generally speaking, a lot of back training just targets all of this. And if you include them into your program, which we'll get into later in this video, you'll find that this shape, this V taper shape, the wings that everyone wants, this is what gives you that effect, and that's why high frequency back training is great. Now, frequency training for size. We've talked about frequency a couple times on the channel for the past couple videos, and frequency training for size, not necessarily the most important thing, because if you do enough volume and you do it on one day versus 2, 3, 4 days, volume is typically equated. So there's a couple of things that you can take from this. You can take the conclusion that, oh, I can just train my back one time a week and I'll get the same amount of growth, and that's fine. Or you can take the approach of, I can train my back multiple times a week and get the same amount of growth as I would if I trained it all on one day. And for a power builder who is training with the constraints of having to improve strength along with size, I think that's a good thing. It's very it took me a while to kind of like get to this conclusion, because I'm fairly stupid, but I always thought to myself, how can I make my training, efficient or optimal or something of that effect? And when I learned, like, high frequency versus low frequency training doesn't really matter so long as volume is equated, I was somewhat defeated by it. But then I realized, wait, if there's no difference fundamentally between higher frequencies and lower frequencies, that means I can train it with a high frequency and get the same amount of back growth. And now I'm able to open up all this other space in my training, in my workouts, for other things like strength development. And that has been a kind of like a holy grail moment or a holy shit moment, because for the most part I've been training myself. So let's start talking about modifications you would make into your program if you were to start including this, because most programs nowadays, push pull legs is a very popular program for God knows why. But anyway, if you are you doing a standard power building training program, which I usually advocate is using an upper lower split as the base, back training is going to be involved in all of those days. That's what I do. That's what I've been doing for the past couple of years. But there's a couple things you need to keep in mind. Because it is high frequency, volume has to be low or moderate per session. So there's a couple things that you can do to modify the volume. For one, you don't need to throw every single back exercise under the sun. You probably can't. This is one of the things that you kind of have to accept. You have to find your big hitters and the things that you can just kind of do on a very frequent basis and cycle through and go from there. So for example, pull-ups. I can do pull-ups every single day and it's not going to be a big issue. I advocate for doing very frequent pull-ups and push-ups to an extent, and chin-ups and all that. So bodyweight exercises are great. They're not as taxing on the nervous system, on the body, as I find other movements to be. So I think calisthenic movements such as pull-ups and chin-ups, great exercise. Inverted rows are another option. Since volume is going to be low, what I would say is, for one, and this is another thing that has to be low, intensity and intensiveness. This means that you shouldn't be lifting super heavy weights. You shouldn't be going to failure on these movements. Usually what I tell myself is, once a rep slows down even a little bit, I'm done. So on chin-ups, I can force myself to do 3-4 more reps, or I can just stop the set there, because I'm going to be doing a lot more sets throughout the workout. So it makes sense to just kind of, save that energy and just go from there. If you are going to implement this, one thing I need to stress to you, which is going to make more sense on the next slide, is you need to start small and you need to start light. There's a wide variety of different exercises that you can do, and you need to manage them kind of intelligently. Meaning that, let's say you did a heavy barbell row the day before, the next day you might just do pull-ups. That's it. Let's say you did, barbell row, pull-ups, and then the next day you want to get some more back work in. You can do something like shrugs, face pulls. The reason why you can do that is because there's so many different exercises that you can do. Like I said, pull-ups and to an extent lat pull-downs can be done on a very frequent basis. It's not that taxing. And there's so many different kinds of rows that are all varying in their difficulty. T-bar rows are a lot harder than a dumbbell row. I mean, unless you're doing like a croc row or something like that. Pendlay rows are not as hard as deadlift rows, because typically speaking, Pendlay rows have to be super strict, but deadlift rows are not. The seated cable row, you can use lighter and heavier weights. And then you have other exercises such as shrugs, pullovers, straight arm lat pull downs, and reverse flies and face pulls. So rear delts are getting involved, traps are getting involved, and of course, vertical and horizontal pulling. Because you have all these options available to you, you can cycle through them in a way so it's kind of like a heavy, light, medium setup. So your back training in your workouts, follow like that heavy, light, medium, so that way recovery isn't going to be the biggest issue, but you're still able to get that high frequency back training stimulus. That's it for this video. If you have any questions regarding back training and how to implement high frequency back training into your program, more videos will be made on the topic, but if there's anything specific that you need me to address, please let me know. Other than that, my name is Carlos the King, StanStrength.com. We have tank tops, so, nice, simple, and feels pretty good. So I'm really looking forward to working out in this today. Other than that, I hope you have a great day and have a very productive week. Have a good one. Peace.